Hi, everyone. This is the Leadership with Heart podcast, and this is Heather Younger, your host. Employee experience and retention is powered by emotions. Managers and or leaders within organizations get to choose which emotions they unleash from within the people they lead. Leaders, meaning supervisors or above in an organization, drive much of the positive or negative emotions by their actions or inactions, their words, or what they fail to say. When a manager chooses their words and their actions carefully, they exhibit great emotional intelligence. These managers are often thought of as leaders who care, or as I like to call them, leaders with heart. This special brand of leader drives engagement and loyalty simply by being themselves. Are these leaders perfect? Absolutely not. It is in their awareness and sharing with some of their imperfections that we realize their brilliance. In this podcast, I ask you to see yourself from the stories my guests tell about the times when they were not the best versions of themselves, but how they used their hearts to guide them to a place of deeper connection with their teams and heightened leadership prowess. Before we get started, I wanted to remind you to follow us on Twitter at Customer Fanatics. That's customer and then Fanatix. And also just follow me on LinkedIn at Heather Younger. That is because I'm in the process of writing a book based upon this podcast, which will have amazing stories of those on the show. And I'm going to be going a little deeper too, so you will not want to miss it. But I'll be putting out tidbits, asking for feedback related to the book cover and just ideas and colors. I want you to be a part of that. I want you to lend your voice to that. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at customerfanatics.com, and you'll get a couple freebies as well, including the first chapter to my book and some emotional intelligence tips as well. Thank you so much for listening, and hopefully you enjoy this show. Hello, everybody. This is Heather with the Leadership with Heart podcast, and today I am really excited to have guest Garry Ridge on the phone. I actually have him on. He was referred to by someone else who actually has a podcast, and I asked her, which people have you spoken to already who really exude leadership with heart? Her knowing the guests that I have on the show and the focus of the show, and speaking to more emotionally intelligent leaders. So, Garry, that's why you're here.
Oh, wow. That's a bit of a praise.
So where are you right now in your leadership journey?
Well, it's a work. I'm a work in progress all the time. I think leadership is not a destination. It is a journey. And I'm very grateful. I think of learning as, education is when you read the fine print, and experience is when you don't. And you put those two together and you get learning, and from that you get knowledge. And I'm very grateful that I have the opportunity to learn from people every day and listen to wonderful things that people are doing, but really listen to the people around me that bring new thoughts of leadership. So I love what Simon Sinek says: leadership is not about being in charge, it's about taking care of the people in your charge. So my journey is one of still taking care.
And that's exactly why you're here. Because if that is the focus, right, and particularly at this point in your career too, it's just less about you and you moving up ranks. You've already reached that level, and now it is more about how do I pass on legacy, right? How do I grow people around me, right?
Well, you go from success, if I've had any, to significance, and I do believe that we can make the world a better place by creating workplaces and cultures where people go to work every day, they make a contribution to something bigger than themselves, they learn something new, they feel safe, and they go home happy. And I think it's an absolute sin that, we're creating environments where 65% of the people who go to work hate their jobs. And if they go home feeling like that, they're going to carry that home. So business today, I believe, Heather, has the biggest opportunity ever to truly make a change in the world. And thankfully, I think leaders are starting to hear it. We've been on this journey for 20 some years where, I love to quote Aristotle. He says, pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. Now, he said that in 384 BC. The problem we have is we must be very slow learners, because You get the soul-sucking CEO in a business who's exercising toxic leadership and sucking the soul out of people. There's no pleasure in the job and there's no perfection in the work.
Wow. And how many folks are under your charge there at WD-40?
We have just over 500 people in the tribe.
Oh, awesome. And I'm sure that they feel all of the stuff you're talking, because I always tell people it starts at the top. There's no doubt. Like when people say, well, it's this and it's that. Yeah, I hear you. But in the end, it's the executive team. So it's the CEO, it's the executive team that starts this. And they are the ones who embrace all the initiatives that help to change and move the culture forward, or they don't. And when they don't, it's not very successful in the long term.
Totally agree with you. We've been measuring the engagement of our tribe for over 20 years. And we're very, very proud of the fact that our engagement is 93% globally, and 99% of our tribe members say they love to tell people they work at our company, and 96% of our tribe members say they respect their coach. Now, a coach here is like your boss. We don't have managers here or supervisors. We have coaches. We are here to help people step into the best version of their personal self every day. And to think that they say they actually respect the person they report to, when as you probably know, most people leave their jobs because they hate their boss.
Yes, absolutely. So I have a question for you. Were you always at this point? Because obviously you've evolved as a leader and you've been around in this industry for a while. What is it that, have you always been there? And if not, what kind of led to some of that conversion, as I like to call it?
Sure. No, I haven't. I mean, in most circumstances, I'm probably wrong and roughly right. But back in 1997, when I got the opportunity to lead the company as CEO, I kind of took a step back and went, how do I create a culture of empowered, engaged people? Because one of our business objectives was to take the blue and yellow can with a little red top, that WD-40 can, to the world. And what became clear to me was micromanagement was not scalable. So I kind of poked around and I looked for an opportunity to help me understand more of what behaviors and what aspects of culture we might like to practice to see if we can do that. So I went back to school and I went to the University of San Diego and I did a master's degree in leadership. And that's where I met Ken Blanchard, who Ken was my professor at USD, and I listened to Ken and I learned from Ken around servant leadership, and that really was the pivot where I said, I think I understand what has to happen here. Organizations need to have a clear, dedicated leadership team that says it's all about the people. We need a true purpose that people can align with. We need a set of values that set people free. Of course, we've got to have strategy and tactics to build an economic engine that is able to support the organization. And then we really have to adopt a true culture of learning. And that was the pivot. And I took what I learned at USD from Ken and a lot of the other professors, and I started to put it into action. And it started to make a difference. Fast forward now, 21 years later, I actually teach in that program. I'm an adjunct professor at USD. I teach culture in that program. And we've put 34 people from WD-40 Company through that master's degree since then. So that's some of the ways we're embedding servant leadership into the organization. The thing that's really exciting, Heather, is I didn't know, but I know now because I can look back over the 20-year period as we started to build employee engagement and build the culture as a company, our economic engine has thrived. We've grown the market cap of the company from just over $300 million to today, $2.4 billion.
Huh.
We've quadrupled the revenue. We've taken employee engagement from the horrible numbers that a lot of companies have to 93%. So I have a defendable case that if you build this culture where people come first, you balance being tough-minded and tender-hearted, you can, even if you just sell a can of oil, because that's all we do, you can build an organization that is remarkably successful and a great place for people to go every day and practice their skills and have a lot of fun.
Mm. Love it. I love that business case. And you may end up showing, well, you're already going to show up in my book, but you may show up in my book in a bigger way because of that. Because I think that oftentimes people are looking for the proof, particularly the CFOs of the organizations, and maybe even the COOs, even CEOs sometimes. They're looking for the proof of all this touchy-feely stuff, right?
They are, because they're scared.
They are.
And it gets down to, this person I created called Al, the soul-sucking CEO. And you get Al, the soul-sucking CEO, and his cousin, short-sighted Sam, together, and then you get disaster. So, this is simple, not easy, and time is not your friend, and you have to keep at it. But what happens is, they expect this to be kind of like an aspirin. You take it and the headache goes away. No, this is a long-term treatment of building culture. And a lot of times people give up because they're not seeing the immediate result. But I again guarantee you, and I have the track record to prove it, that if you build these amazing cultures, you build amazing organizations.
Well, so where does your drive to lead come from? I mean, it's obvious that you're just a visionary. And so, but I'm curious to know, did it start, really young, and how it got started?
I've always had a want to learn. I'm a curious sort of guy, and I caught this disease around wanting to see people succeed. I just get an enormous amount of joy out of being able to help someone. And many, many, many years ago, I was traveling to China, and I was on a plane, and I was reading one of the Dalai Lama books, and there was a statement in there that just hit me real hard, and it's this. The Dalai Lama says, our purpose in life is to make people happy. If we can't make them happy, at least don't hurt them. And I kind of went, you know what? That's what I want to be. If I can't make people happy, I don't want to hurt them. And I thought, that's not a bad mantra to stand to. Mm-hmm. So that kind of was the thing, growing up in Australia, and as I look back, and in my book that I wrote with Ken Blanchard, I wrote my leadership point of view in there. And it talks about, when I reflected on it, the people who'd helped me in my young life, and how if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be who I am today. And I thought, you know what, I want to be one of those people. I want to be someone that, helps people step into the best version of their personal self. So that's what it is.
Nice. Well, that's great. I think, I hear all kinds of things, basically the reasons why people are leading. And this one, I like the way that there's multi-levels to this, multi-facets to your why, right? Because I think what often happens with leaders is they lose their why. Either they don't have the why, so they're not clear on what it is they're doing. And being, a leader or a manager, whatever, it's hard doing that, whether it's a huge, massive organization, whether it's a team of 15, it's hard work. And you really do have to have a very clear why for it. So I appreciate that you've delineated that for us in your own words, right?
Yeah, well, what I love about my life? I get to wake up every day to do something that I love. I get to inspire people to create positive, lasting memories. That's the most wonderful thing in the world. And the best part of is trying to figure out all the different ways I can do that.
If the toughest thing you have to do today is to find out more creative ways to help people step into their best selves and for them to achieve great things, boy, that's not a hard life to live, right? That's amazing.
And people say to me, you're very busy, Gary. I say, no, I'm not busy. I have an abundance of worthwhile work.
Love it.
Difference between busy and an abundance of worthwhile work. So, I really do look at things. I think if this is not worthwhile, I don't want to do it, because, life's a gift. Don't send it back unwrapped. And we ain't, time's not our friend here.
It's so true. And I think about that too. Well, because I'm in the same place you're in. I feel very blessed to do the work that I do, even just to have this kind of conversation right here, but all the work I do in the employee engagement and leadership space. I feel so blessed to be able to wake up and do it. I don't feel like it's a chore every day. I'm like, oh, I'm so excited to be doing this. But, I wasn't always there. And I was in those places where you're talking about, where there's the blood-sucking CEOs and the just the folks who are limited in their thinking and hurt you more than help you. And having that experience helps me be better in what I'm doing right now. And I'd imagine that's your context too, right? You had to have stumbled upon some people that weren't so great for you to become better.
Oh yeah, I've been around a lot of the soul-sucking CEOs, but when someone else's happiness is your happiness, that's love.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And today, the biggest disease we have in business and society is loneliness.
Mm.
And, people are getting lonelier and lonelier. I was just watching a YouTube the other day, someone talking about, the biggest group of lonely kids are between 18 and 22. And the reason they're lonely is they don't date anymore. And the reason they don't date anymore is because all they do is interact through, electronic means. So how are they building those personal relationships? So I think we've got to be really careful of that sort of stuff too. I love technology, don't get me wrong. But I tell you, I don't like it when it takes the human being out of the human being.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always tell people, and of course they look at me like I have 5 heads, but telling leaders, it doesn't matter what level of the organization they're in, that they really need to have one-on-one time with their direct reports, and sitting with them, not just about tasks, but really, digging deep and finding out how they're doing and talking to them about things outside of work. And of course they look at me like, well, how do I have time to do that? And they're like, well, I do that every 2 months. Yeah, no, I need you to be looking at once a week, and if maybe twice a month, but that would be the most, because you have to continue the connection. How do you get to know people? How do you impact people if you're not spending that time with them? So I'm right on that page with you, Garry.
Absolutely. And, I don't know if you know any of the work of Michael Bungay Stainer. He wrote a great book called The Coaching Habit. And I know Michael through the Marshall Goldsmith group that I'm involved in. Wonderful, wonderful guy. And he has 7 simple questions about in coaching that are really important. And I love the first 2 questions when you sit down to talk to people. The first question is, and what's on your mind? And the second question is, and what else?
Oh, I love it.
And that's where the conversation starts. I get up very early every morning to clear anything that's not important out of the first part of my day. And I spend the first few hours of my every day interacting somehow with the tribe, whether it's just walking around the office chatting, whether it's on the phone with people in far off countries. And it's not about what your result's going to be. It's like, hey, what's on your mind? How's things going? What do you do? What fun are you having? Where are we going? Those are the sort of things that I think are important. I send a daily message out every day, and it's called For Today From. And wherever I am in the world, it says For Today From. So today at 4 something in the morning, I was at my house in Poway, California. And it was For Today from Poway, California. And these little people love getting these little messages. The one that I sent out this morning, and if I may indulge to share with you, because I think it's lovely.
Yes.
It says, the simple formula for living. Live beneath your means, return everything you borrow, stop blaming other people, and admit it when you make mistakes, give clothes not worn to charity. Anyhow, it's a list that goes on. It ends with, don't sweat the small stuff. But it's things like this I try to send out every day to help people understand that, life is a journey and we're going to bump into things. And but if we can keep that oxytocin running in our brain, and we can look for the brighter side as well as, being tough-minded, we have to be tender-hearted, and the balance is getting in the middle of that. Mm-hmm. So that's what we love.
Yeah, that's true. So I'm curious to know if you have any specific stories for the listeners, because we can obviously hear that you're wonderful. But was there ever a time where maybe you weren't so proud of yourself as a leader, where you might have stumbled and it was not so pretty? But then, after that, like, what did you do to come out of that specific story? What happened in that situation, and what did you do to come out of it?
One of my big, I don't make mistakes. I only have learning moments. That's what I like to think about. I either fail or I learn. I don't fail, I either win or I learn. And one of my big learning moments in life was getting very used to 3 of the 3 most powerful words I've ever learned in my life. And those 3 most powerful words are, I don't know. And early in my leadership career, I thought it was my job that I should know everything. And when I got very comfortable with being able to admit that, and being very comfortable with what I shared earlier, which is, I say openly now, in most circumstances, I'm probably wrong and roughly right. And so when I thought I needed to know everything, what I was doing was closing out people. And I said, well, no, I can't be that. I can't do that. So that was a big learning for me many years ago, that once I got over it, it was amazing the flourishing learning I got from just being someone who, even though I had authority, I was pretty comfortable admitting vulnerability and being around people who are a lot smarter than me, and just benefiting from that.
Was there a specific time when you just got a little too full of yourself, or again, that you were no, I'm right, no, I'm right, not listening? Was there a specific moment when that happened that you can recall?
When I moved from Australia to the US in 1994, that was my kind of aha moment, because even though you would think the culture of Australians and the culture of Americans is very similar, there are a lot of differences. And I left Australia pretty cocky about knowing things. And I got here and it's like, oh my God. And I remember sitting in a meeting very early when I was here, and there was a person had come in, a consultant from somewhere, to talk to a group of us about something, a leadership group at the company. And I was sitting there listening to this person, and I went, mentally, I have no clue what this person's talking about. This is completely foreign to me. And for some reason, I put up my hand and I said, look, I'm sorry. I have no clue what you're talking about. And suddenly the room went, because they didn't know either. But I was the dumb Aussie that was able to put up my hand and say, I don't get it. And that was a big learning for me. And that's what gave me the courage. So the learning moment was when I was put into a situation where I didn't know anymore. And that felt very uncomfortable. I felt very insecure. My God, if I don't know, I'm going to be vulnerable. I'm going to be able to be attacked, but I needed to be vulnerable, and I was.
So for those people who are listening right now, and maybe they're struggling in their leadership, that are crossroads in their leadership, they might be just in a tough spot. I'd be curious to know if there are any pearls of wisdom you'd like to lead them with today.
It's not about you, is number one. One of the biggest flaws I've seen is when ego eats empathy instead of empathy eating ego. And if you are struggling with your leadership, take a step back and work out whether it's because you're thinking too much about yourself and not enough about others. And if you're thinking more about others, the self of you will be okay. That's a big learning that I've had along the way. And just be open and curious. I read another great book recently. I'm sure those that are listening have probably read the book Who Moved My Cheese, Hem and Harvey. Well, there was a sequel to that, and unfortunately, Spencer Stewart, who wrote that, passed away, and his kids, just before his passing, and him, wrote a new book called Out of the Maze. And it talks about how Hem and Ha actually got out of that maze eventually. And it talks about beliefs. And it says a belief is a thought that you trust to be true. And it says, don't believe everything you think. Sometimes the facts are just how you see things. And that is so true. And, and I find myself today more than ever questioning, why do I believe something? Because you've got to refresh your beliefs. And, it's interesting, in the absence of data and facts, we make up stories. And then that becomes our own belief. So as a leader, get rid of the ego, adopt empathy, make sure that you treasure the gift of others, and question, why do you believe what you believe? And I think those are things that really strengthen the leadership thinking of folks.
It's interesting, the questioning beliefs, because I remember probably about 4 or 5 years ago, I was teaching a course on customer experience at a county that I used to work for, and someone kind of challenged my thought process related to this idea of the golden rule, treat others as you want them to be treated, as you want, as you'd want to be treated, basically. And someone said, I actually have thought about this recently, and I realized that it's not about treating them how I'd want to be treated, it's treating them how they want to be treated. And so then what becomes tricky in any situation when we're building relationships with people, right, is we have to really, like we talked about earlier, spend time listen intently to understand, so that we can know what it is that would make them, feel respected and loved and cared for, and what it is that they want to feel. Because otherwise, we start putting our own lens on it based upon our own experiences and our own beliefs. We put our own spin, and it might not meet their needs. Right. And so one of the things I try to coach people to do is be thinking about when you're meeting one-on-one, you're being with your team, is to not try to make this a cookie cutter relationship, because cookie cutters aren't going to get you from where you went from 300 million to 2.2 billion. It's about how are you interacting and engaging on the individual level of people, meeting them where they're at. Right.
Absolutely. I learned when I went to school and did my master's in leadership, when the first course in that is understanding who you are, because if you don't know who you are, you'll never be able to work out who anyone else is. And if you're trying to lead someone, you probably can't change them, so it's your behavior that will change their actions. So and I had a beautiful story for that. You may be aware of the DISC model, DISC.
Yes.
And I in my first DISC model, I was a turbo D: be brief, be bright, be gone. and I learned that 22 years ago. I thought, well, that's not going to get me too far, is it? And I was intense about moving out of being a D into an I. So I wanted to go from a DI to an ID, and I had to work on it, and I'd write on my palm of my hand every day, praise someone, and I had to practice all this. Now when I do the DISC, I'm now an I. I'm not a turbo I. A turbo I is someone who's late for a meeting because they're building relationships along the way.
Yeah.
Also work. But I also love the fact, Peter Drucker, two things he said that are very, very important. Think first, speak last, and ask, don't tell. I think it's really important.
Yes. Yes, all of that is super important. I often what I find, and this is not, it's with leaders, but it's just with people, just with humanity, with us as humans, that, people will complain about others, and I always turn it around and say, well, what are you doing? What are you doing about you? And here's the thing, there's a sphere of control that we all have, and you can control what you can, and you need to focus on those things. And it usually is our mindset, and then how our behaviors spread out from there. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, our mind drives everything, and we need to look in the mirror. It's just really important. I believe in that totally. And I'm just this goofy sort of Aussie guy bumbling down the road alive, bumping into stuff. This is, if I can kind of work some of this out, anybody can.
I think that's one of the things I love about having this podcast is all of this is about a journey. I mean, that's why I like people to share their stories of when they weren't so great, because the idea here is that we always have those times. And no matter how wonderful we are, there are always those kind of bumps in the road that cause us to go, uh-oh, and we have to just reshuffle and decide how we're going to sharpen that blade, right? And just continue to get better, but we're never going to be perfect.
The trick is being vulnerable enough to recognize it. That's the trick.
Yeah, self-aware. You're right. Yeah. Absolutely.
And okay with the learning moment. That's why I love the learning moment, because, in the company, we don't make mistakes. We have learning moments, and people are, always talking about, this is what I learned. That's what I learned. It was positive or a negative outcome. This is what I think I need to change next time to make it better than it is today, which is one of our values. So it's all about the atmosphere that you create that allows people to, be free, and values help them be free, and that creates this just continual learning, curiosity, awareness. I have this thing about candor. I say no lying, no faking, no hiding. I believe most people don't lie. I believe most interactions are people faking and hiding. And why do they fake and hide? Because they're afraid. And why are they afraid? Because the soul-sucking CEO creates this atmosphere where people can't be honest. They have to hide something because they're afraid they're going to get attacked or ridiculed or, whatever. So people have great ideas, and there's only one thing to say to them: thank you. Well, let me take that on board, and let's see what we can do with it. And we'll work it out later on, and blah, blah, blah. So.
Well, thank you for bringing a bright light out in the world and absolutely exhibiting the leadership with heart principles. And kind of the reason why I even started the show is to have people like you that people can learn from. And so I really appreciate that. So for those who are listening right now, please do make sure that if you found value in this conversation, share it everywhere, because obviously otherwise what will happen is all of the message will be it'll stop with you. And that would really be a biggest travesty. You want to share it, make sure more people can learn from it. And so also when you do share and when you do that, it actually brings more people in because of the algorithms and all these different platforms. The more people are on there, subscribe and listening, the more that it's brought out and people can actually see it. It's highlighted. So I want to make sure that we can do that. And I want to thank you so much for joining the Leadership with Heart podcast. And Garry, thank you too so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership with Heart podcast. You can grab the show notes by visiting customerfanatics.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter.